Hello and welcome to Your Choice 2020 Primary Election coverage on HOMTV. I'm Brandy Yates. Joining me for this candidate interview is Dan Opsommer, Democratic incumbent candidate for Meridian Township Trustee. Dan, thank you so much for being here. And at this time, if you could introduce yourself to the viewing audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brandy. It's wonderful to be with you. And thank you to you and everyone at HOMTV for all that you do to keep our community informed. So my name is Dan Opsommer. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Township Board for the past 4 years. And prior to that, I served on the Planning Commission. I was born and raised here in the Lansing region. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University and East Lansing Public Schools. And my wife is a nurse at Sparrow Hospital. And our son Jack turns 11 next month. So he just wrapped up his K-12 school year, albeit somewhat difficultly at the end. But he attends Pinecrest, and I've been very active in the community throughout the years. I'm a former past president of the East Lansing Kiwanis Club, active in the Hazlet Beautification Association, and just have really enjoyed the privilege and honor of serving our community over the past 5 years on the board and planning commission.
Thank you. Each Meridian Township Trustee candidate will be asked a sample list of 12 questions. We will get started with question number 1. Explain how your education and professional background make you an ideal candidate for Township Trustee.
Absolutely. So I actually earned my undergraduate degree at Michigan State, and it's in journalism and history. I actually had the pleasure of attending MSU with Brandy by chance. And, when I graduated, the media industry was changing rapidly. But through that work and my coverage, I actually found my passion for public policy, covering local units of government and the state legislature. So I've actually served as the chief of staff to 5 Democratic lawmakers over the years. And in the era of term limits, a big part of that job is helping to acclimate them to the legislature. They're there for a very brief period of time, 6 years in the House. And so I've helped 5 different lawmakers come in and be successful in representing their constituents, helping them craft their legislative agenda, helping them vet legislation. And, many of our residents have taken trips to the Capitol, whether it's with their kids for a classroom tour or otherwise, but it is an experience when you're there on a session day. It is fast paced. Many nights I'm up at 10 p.m. prepping for the day ahead because we have successive meetings, 3 or 4 meetings in a row. Then we're through committee hearings that last a half hour to an hour, and they're back to back. And then typically you have to get the representative off to session the next day. So I currently serve as the chief of staff to Julie Brixey, our state rep here in Meridian Township, and a former colleague of mine on the township board when she served as treasurer. And I'm honored to have her support for my reelection. And then, I think the best example of how that professional experience works for the residents of Meridian Township can be conveyed through an example. So right now I am working with residents that live adjacent to the old Walnut Hills. And we've had a systemic issue where the new owner who bought the property when it went to auction has just left it to deteriorate. If you were to venture back there and look at the clubhouse, the buildings are busted up. There's shards of glass everywhere. The pool is full of water from the snow melt and from rain. And these are all community hazards. A kid could slip and fall into the pool. Someone could very seriously injure themselves. And even the home up by the street, up by Lake Lansing, is actually has major structural issues and could actually fall down at any given time. So about 2 weeks ago, I initiated a process through our township. There's a public act that allows us to demolish dangerous buildings like this. And so 2 weeks ago, we initiated that process at my request. And just this morning, we actually arrived at a timeline for getting those buildings taken down. So right now we're looking at demolition occurring in 45 days and having it completed within 66 days. And another facet of that is crafting and amending our grass ordinance. The owner has also left the grass to just grow year round without, he comes in and brush hogs at the very end of the season or periodically. And so I'm also amending that ordinance. So having a familiarity with public policy and how to craft legislation and public policy to produce outcomes is a major strength. And that's one of the reasons why I've been very successful. And there's, every neighborhood has a different issue. This is just one example. But if you have an idea of where you want to get to, the outcome is easy. We know we want the grass to be cut, and we know we want the buildings demolished, but how you get there can be tricky, and there's a lot of legal minutia involved. And so I've been honored to have the opportunity to bring my work experience and put it to good use here in the township.
Question number 2. What do you believe are the needs of the community, and explain how you plan to meet those needs or expand upon those needs?
So the neighborhood-specific issues are an ongoing process, and it's just good customer service to continue addressing any neighborhood issues that come about. So that's a continuous one. Other matters that are really before us at this point would be implementing our 10-year road plan. So we have 147 miles of township roads, and the voters approved a road millage so that we can implement a 10-year plan to bring all 147 miles up to an 8 to a 10 on a PACER rating. So that's very good to excellent condition. And in our first year of the program, we're actually doing work on 26 miles. So if you extrapolate that out, we will work on about 260 miles during the 10-year program. And that's due to, a range of work from total reconstruction to asset management and making sure we're preserving those road miles appropriately. Another big one right now is diversity, inclusion, and equality. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and the Black Lives Matter movement has really brought this to the forefront. And we all need to be self-examining and self-reflecting and taking inventory of all of our institutions and the biases and the racial disparities that are inherent within those institutions. So one of the things that I'm currently working on is a ordinance, or actually a board policy to what's referred to as ban the box. And so what that does is it eliminates the criminal background checkbox on an application form for township HR purposes. And so that gives applicants the opportunity to actually share their experience, their knowledge, and their credentials. And it puts the criminal background checks at the tail end of the HR process. So this is something that cities and private institutions throughout the country have undertaken as a part of all this. And so that's something that I'm bringing forward at the next meeting. And we will also be bringing forward an effort to create a DEI committee to look at this issue long-term and to take that full inventory and self-reflection on what can we do to address these biases that are inherent within the township and other institutions within the township. So, and then thirdly, I would say full implementation of our commitment to fully fund our pension system is essential. So that was a plan that we put forward in 2017 and is slated to be completed in 2027. And it requires rigorous oversight, just like the roads. So making sure that those investments are being made and that we're adjusting to changing economic circumstances. So I would say those are 3 of the big things at the forefront at the moment.
Question number 3. How would you prioritize the use of township general funds, especially in the current economic climate and uncertainties surrounding COVID-19?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I've pushed for general fund uses has been our investment in solar energy. So we undertook our first solar array 2 years ago, and then we're doing another one this year, twice the scale of our first year. And so what that amounts to, along with the HVAC project that we're undertaking this year, would be about 30% of the energy usage at the township hall would be generated by renewable sources when you take those 3 projects combined. And that's all general fund dollars that we're using to achieve that. And my goal would be for us to actually achieve 100% renewable generation for township energy use by 2030. and that would have to come from general fund appropriations and continued investment in that area. So that's a commitment that I'm making to the community. And as it relates to COVID-19, one of the good things for the township is that we're not profoundly impacted in terms of our revenue by COVID-19. Property values are still safe. We could see a dip in commercial or professional and office, depending on what happens economically. But by and large, our property tax base has been preserved. And so the impact for us financially is going to be constitutional revenue sharing and statutory revenue sharing. And so, with statutory revenue sharing has basically been eliminated by the Republican-controlled legislature. The constitutional revenue sharing, if we see a 20% drop in sales tax revenue, which is roughly what we would expect to see given COVID-19, that would be about $800,000 to the township's budget. And for that is not a huge impact. We would probably have to look at delaying some of our capital outlay projects a year or two until we can kind of get past the economic ramifications of COVID-19. So thankfully, it hasn't been a huge issue for the township, but what that's allowed us to do is actually invest. We've done 45 small business grants. So these are businesses that were originated and founded here in Meridian Township. And those were very flexible $4,000 grants, unlike the Paycheck Protection Program at the federal level. Business owners could use it to pay the rent or their mortgage payment. It didn't have to go straight into payroll that they may or may not have had at the time. And then we've also used general fund dollars to bolster the Meridian Cares Fund, which now has a record level, 10 times, the level of fund balance it's seen in most years. And it sits at $100,000. So if residents are in need right now, they should reach out and seek help from the Meridian Cares Fund because we're here to help. And then the only other thing I would flag on that would be the Meridian COVID hotline. We had one resident who was at higher risk and didn't want to leave her home to get certain essential supplies. And we were able to get her those supplies and bring them to her. So if anybody has any kind of extenuating circumstances, they should feel free to call and ask for help. Thank you.
Question number 4 out of 12, and we're a little over halfway, and I do want to allow time for a closing statement. So moving on to question number 4, please explain your thoughts on the business climate and future developments in Meridian Township.
So the business climate, obviously online retail is really eating away at our brick and mortar stores, and that's a big concern. Things that we've done to try to help address that has been infill development around the mall, which is kind of the anchor of our commercial. And so the Farmers Market project, which is actually being constructed right now, is a great example of that. But we're pursuing other opportunities. And another good thing that we've actually done that brings both diversity and inclusion and also helps support those brick and mortar stores in the mall would be bringing the Chinese New Year to the mall. That allowed them to expand that celebration. And then also bringing Celebrate Meridian to the Township Hall. So we're bringing those residents adjacent to the mall and trying to drive traffic, not only to the mall, but the adjacent commercial.
Question number 5, what major changes do you believe township residents would like to see in the near future?
So one thing that, if there's any silver lining to COVID-19, which there really is none, but our residents are using our pathways and our sidewalk system and our trail system more than ever. And so they're kind of seeing for themselves some of the deficiencies in it. And that just comes from, our millage isn't to the scale of where it would need to be to build out the system in its totality. We have a master plan. We're trying to implement that. And we're also trying to capture those county trail dollars. And so I think, if anything, residents are becoming more cognizant that we need to connect, our trail system, and we need to actually improve that connectivity for biking and walking. So that's one that I am hearing from township residents that they would like to see in the near future. Our other services, whether it be roads or police and fire, water and sewer, are very well funded, and the revenue stream is sufficient to cover it. The pathway system is one of those services out there where we've taken the approach of building it slowly over time. mostly through development. And then if I had to add anything else on that, it would obviously be downtown Hazlet and downtown Okemos, and that's a trickier one. You know, we're reliant on private investors, but we've done everything that we can. We've retooled the Okemos DDA so that we have the necessary funds once development occurs to pay for the infrastructure improvements. You know, that's the old Plank Road to Detroit. So the infrastructure under Hamilton and Okemos there is the oldest in the entire township. And then we have two projects that we actually hope to break ground in downtown Hazlet this year. So that would be the first meaningful investment that we've seen in a very long time. And so I'm proud that, you know, we've been able to get two projects for downtown Hazlet, and we will continue to work with everyone and try to get the village of Okemos to break ground as soon as possible as well.
Question number 6, and you've touched upon this a little bit, but what steps do you believe the township should take to enhance diversity within the workforce to effectively represent the diverse makeup of the community?
Yeah, so one other thing that we've done that's been very successful is we established a tuition program, and it comes with both tuition and a stipend. So any minority applicants that come to the township, we will actually send them through the police academy free of tuition and with that stipend. And that's allowed us to increase the diversity of our police force 400% over the past 3.5 years. And so that's the largest uptick we've ever seen in terms of the growing diversity in our police force. And we have more work to do on that front, but that program needs to continue and will be a big factor in that. You know, the community commission that I referenced earlier is going to be the largest driver because it's that continued self-reflection and inventory. And it can serve to, you know, identify the faults that we have and the areas that we need to improve on to make sure that Black Lives Matter here in Meridian Township, and that we're living up to, you know, the movement's spirit and objectivity. You know, as I referenced also, the Chinese community often also feels, you know, as if they're not engaged as well as they should be. Probably the most that they've engaged on the township board level is when we went through the medical marijuana ordinance discussion, and they came out and, you know, one board member tried to suppress their communications to the board and summarize them. And the board made sure that all of the communications, which I believe it was over 100, were published in our packet so that those were not suppressed. But bringing the Chinese New Year to the Meridian Mall and helping to sponsor that through the township's EDC has really done wonders in making that celebration the community event that it should be.
Question number 7. What are your thoughts on how the township has handled environmental concerns?
So I would put this at one of our top issues, and we deal with this just about every meeting, and I dealt with this on the Planning Commission because land use decisions are a huge component of that. So on site plans, we typically do tree surveys. And so one neighborhood that I worked on the plat for, we literally moved the road based on, you know, the tree survey. And that happens frequently throughout our planning process. To give another example on the planning front, we had a great opportunity to improve a parcel adjacent to the Red Cedar River. So it's back on North Wind Drive. It's the old white professional and office buildings. And there's a building back there, one of those white professional and office buildings was built literally in the floodway of the Red Cedar River. And a lot of its parking was also built in the floodway. And so the Planning Commission recommended denial, rightfully so, on a plan that was brought forward because it wasn't going to really improve the site the way that we wanted to in terms of getting that impervious surface out of the floodway. But we were able to work with the developer. We didn't want to pass up that opportunity to improve the site. So we worked with the developer to reduce the number of units, cut the footprint. We went up one more story so that we could pack those remaining units up a floor and get the entire building and parking out of the floodway. And so that was a great opportunity to improve, the Red Cedar watershed and flood occurrences that we experience. And then I would just reiterate that, working towards 100% renewable energy by 2030 is really the single best thing that we can do locally to do our part in tackling climate change. And so that's something that, we're well on our way to, and I remain committed to seeing that through. And then thirdly, I've also been working on amending and strengthening our tree protection ordinance. We still do see, especially when there's a use by right, developers cut down trees that can and should be saved. And so we're looking at best practices in other communities across Michigan and even some other states on how to best protect those trees up front. And when that occurs, creating a tree bank program where the developer would have to pay in as a penalty to replace those trees. And obviously, you can never fully replace it, but it's about coming up with the equivalency and examining each species and making specific requirements. So we're working on that ordinance, and I look forward to working on that again this fall.
Okay, we're a little under 10 minutes left in the interview. We have question number 8. Please address the condition of Meridian Township's infrastructure.
Yeah, so we talked about roads. The one thing I didn't reference on roads is that we currently, we typically score roads on a 1 to 10 scale. And in Meridian Township, out of our 147 miles, the average today is about a 4. And that's why we created this 10-year plan, because we wanted to bring that average up over an 8. So that's every road mile would be very good to excellent condition at the end of the 10-year program in 2029. So right there, we have a plan for roads, and I'm committed to seeing that through. One of the things I've done on roads is I've actually personally visited each road project every year that I've served on the board to make sure that the work was done properly and there was no need for warranty work or any corrections to be made. Another thing that we're doing, and this kind of dovetails into the environmental work, we rigorously scope our water and sewer lines, and it's especially important for sewer. Over about 95% of our tap water, our drinking water here in the Lansing region, comes from groundwater. And so any breakages in our sewer lines have to be identified and corrected to protect that groundwater. And that's something that our engineering department is working on rigorously and continuously, and they bring updates and reports to the board on that. And our program is really working very well. I would also, reference a big project that needs to happen is fixing Grand River Avenue. That project was pushed back. The state pushed it back to 2023. I was actually on the phone with MDOT earlier this week, and there is, it appears as though we will actually see that project move up to 2022. And so that would be reconstructing and resurfacing Grand River Avenue from Park Lake to Central Park. And so that's a big project and a big investment in our region that's needed. And we've got pathway systems, sidewalks adjacent to that road that are actually caving into the wetlands across from Playmakers. And that project's critical to addressing that infrastructure as well.
Question number 9. Explain the role new technologies and innovations can play in Meridian Township.
Yeah, so the biggest one that we've been working on is 5G technology. So this is cellular technology, and it's critical for us into the future. And so we've actually established an ordinance, and former communications director Deborah Guthrie helped lead that effort with the township board to establish it. And so that's critical, and we are still waiting on applications to come through under that ordinance, but it was very thorough, and I'm very proud of that ordinance. And then, we've had an ongoing discussion about township-wide broadband, and that's something that I think needs to continue. There's obviously a lot of issues with state law that would have to be worked through, but that would be a tremendous community amenity if you didn't have to go through Comcast or AT&T to get your internet. And we could collectively do that through a public investment here in the township. And just one other note, and it kind of dovetails back to the Meridian Cares Fund. Broadband is essential even in the best of times. And right now with virtual learning that our children are doing, nobody needs to have their internet shut off. So if any residents are having issues with that, the board worked to make sure that the Meridian Cares Fund would help residents pay their internet bill. So if anybody is in that situation, please contact Meridian Cares so that we can assist you in making sure that your internet is not shut off.
So we have about 5 minutes left and 3 more questions, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to make a closing statement. So question number 10, what do you consider to be the top 2 challenges facing Meridian Township?
Fixing downtown Hazlet and downtown Okemos and bringing back the charm to those areas. That has to be the top 2 challenges because of the limitations where we're faced with private development, and it's up to the private, we can't compel the development to occur, but we're doing everything we can to help make sure that we can fund the public infrastructure costs and all the other associated items that go along with that kind of project, so that as soon as we have projects, we can realize those. And, I would love nothing more than to see Horrocks come to Hazlet. So, I'd love to see a grocery return to Carriage Hills and Hazlet.
Question number 11. What goals would you like to see the township accomplish in the next 5 years?
Okay, so that's a bit of a loaded one. So if I had to name 5, I would certainly, number 1 would be the reforms and initiatives that I've spoken to address the public health crisis that is racism. We need to, as I've stated, we need to identify and address these racial biases that exist in the township and other institutions and realize the promise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I remain committed to seeing that through. Oversight of our 10-year road plan is critical, and I remain committed to visiting all of those projects and rigorously overseeing the engineering of those projects. And we also need continued implementation of our plan to fully fund the pension system by 2027. So those 3 plans are going to be essential for the financial health and the public investment here in the township. And then realizing 100% renewable energy by 2030 would be another one of my goals. And for the 5th, I would have to say restoring the charm of downtown Hazlet and Okemos.
Question number 12, and our final question. What inspired you to run for township trustee?
Well, I felt like my professional background gave me the opportunity, and as I referenced, I served on the planning commission before. And so it's such an honor to actually help, plan and chart the course for the future. And sometimes that's saying no. The current board has been an absolute no on student housing, for instance. But it also gives you the opportunity to be a part of the revitalization of, our traditional downtowns and to really have an impact on the future of the community. And I've been involved in the community, my entire life, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to give back and serve on the township board. And I hope voters will place their trust in me for 4 more years.
And with the remaining minute or so, if you want to add anything to a brief closing statement, we'd like to give you this opportunity.
Yeah, I would just encourage residents, if they want to learn more about me, they can visit my website, danopsommer.com. And my cell phone's on there. It's been on there since I first ran in 2016. If you ever need to reach me, please reach out. I get inquiries from, how do I go about getting my deck built to, what do I do about the special use permit that's being applied for, across the street from me. So there's a wide range of issues, and never hesitate to reach out. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for watching this candidate interview with Dan Opsommer, Democratic incumbent candidate for Meridian Township Trustee. I'm Brandy Yates, inviting you to also watch live primary election night coverage on Tuesday, August 4th, right here on HOMTV. Thanks for watching.